Hi, everyone. Always delighted to have a second talk with an author, and in this case, I am delighted to be talking with HM Bouwman. May I call you HM, Heather? How would you like me
Heather. Heather's
Okay,
good.
all
Yeah.
right, all right. Well, Heather, thank you for joining for a second talk, and I know that we are talking in particular on this episode about craft and the work of writing that you do. I'll mention a couple of titles: Crack in the Sea, A Tear in the Ocean, Gossamer Summer being a few of those. So you are published and out in the world of writing and creating in wonderful ways. Curious about that process of how these books have come to be and how they're now in the world around us.
Yeah, different ones come in different ways, I guess.
Hmm.
So, Crack in the Sea is a historical fantasy, so there was a lot of historical research that I did for that book. I have a historical fantasy that actually is sitting with an editor right now, so I'm hoping she's going to buy it. But those take a lot of time to kind of pull together, and it's also multi-plotted, right? Crack in the Sea is. So I don't know. I feel like those have more architecture to them, whereas like Gossamer Summer is one plot, and also there's no historical piece to it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, and it's shorter. It's half the length of A Crack in the Sea, because it's for a younger readership, and that one just was much faster to write, and that's my most recent one that's out right now.
Hmm.
I started that in January of 2020, wrote a lot of it in lockdown in March of 2020 and following. Sent it to my agent in the summer. She asked me for some revisions and I sent it back again. And then she sent it out. And I think we sold it in January of 2021.
Hmm.
Well, I don't know, can't remember if that's right or not. Anyway, we sold it pretty quickly. Um,
Nice, nice.
yeah, and then I did revisions for that editor, Reka Simonson, as well. So yeah, that was a pretty straightforward process. Like, didn't the book as it is finished is way better than the first draft that I wrote, but it's not remarkably different in terms of like where it was headed, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Whereas with like Crack in the Sea, there were whole plots that got cut out and other plots that entered in as I revised the book. So there was a whole thing about the 1973 gas crisis at one point. That's not anywhere in the book, but for a while, that was like a big chunk of the book. So yeah, a lot of stuff that just I didn't know where I was going with it for a while.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, yeah.
The architectural process of a book.
Yeah, the multi-plotted books feel more like architecture than plotting. So it feels really nice to come back to a like the book that's coming out next year is a single, it's first person. It's my first person novel. And so it's a single viewpoint character and it's all told from her point of view. And yeah, there's some flashbacks and some memories in it, but it's pretty much straightforward chronologically.
Mhm.
And that just feels so in a way so straightforward and easy. It's not easy. I don't mean to say that to other people who are writing it, but it just feels there's other difficulties with it, but the architecture is not the hard part.
What draws you to particular stories and genres?
Oh, I have pretty wide-ranging interests. I did a PhD in early American literature up to
Hmm.
1800, so a lot of colonial so-called literature of exploration, propaganda literature written by Europeans, things like that. And it was that's entails a lot of historical research.
Hmm.
So Crack in the Sea has research that it somewhat goes back to that era. And the new book that's sitting with my editor right now has a lot of research that goes back to that era too. But I also just get really interested in things. So I started looking at old maps and just got obsessed with old maps for this book that I hope she's going to buy. Um, and so I have just put so much more time into old maps than ever will show up in the book. But it's been really fun and I've learned a lot and traveled to old map archives and really gotten to know what especially this one map maker in the Netherlands, Johan Blau, was doing in the 1660s. And it's been really fun. I don't know. I like learning stuff.
Yeah. Then you get to follow your curiosity as an
Yeah,
author and
yeah,
weave it
pretty
in.
much. I'm interested in something, and then it feels like, well, that could go in a book. I
Hmm.
should start researching it.
Oh, yeah. I'm curious also about that process of world building. So we've talked about kind of the architecture of bringing the narratives together, but thinking about crafting an entire world that can't be an easy thing. So I'm curious about that process.
I teach world building in my creative writing classes too. Like I teach a fantasy writing course and we talk about world building. And there's really different processes that different writers follow. And some are very meticulous and create, entire Bibles for their world, so to speak, like Tolkien's Silmarillion, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
coming up with all the backstory and the language and all the history and all that stuff. And I admire that, but I don't do it. I'm a much more intuitive world builder. And also I feel like my worlds are more fairy tale like, which means they don't need to have that kind of infrastructure because fairy tales take place in pretty, once upon a time, long time ago, in a
Hmm.
forest kind of world, right? So, in order to make a novel, of course, you have to get into more detail than that. But I do think that the fairy tale feel lends itself to a more intuitive world building. So that has worked in my favor quite a bit. That said, when I do the historical stuff, I feel like I want the history to be accurate.
Hmm.
So most of the world building that I'm doing in my fantasy worlds has to do with the historical pieces that I'm trying to get right and then figure out how to work into a world that also includes magic.
Yeah.
So if I'm talking about a particular incident that happened, I want to make sure the history on that incident is correct, even as I'm trying to work it into a different world.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you're describing this, I'm just thinking about the process of just thinking through all of this and drafting and revising it. Are you a notebook keeper? Or are you a person that goes to docs and notes?
Some of both.
Mm.
The book that's coming out next year, I actually first drafted in 2003.
Oh, nice, nice. Wow.
2003 was the first draft, and I know that because I was pregnant with my second child at the time that I drafted it, so I can always remember what date that was. And I was still working on paper then, so I have paper notebooks that go back
Mm.
to that. So when this book sold a year or so ago, I was like, oh my gosh, where are the notebooks? Like a lot of my notes are not on the computer anymore, and I needed to go back and check things and kind of re-delve into them in order to do revisions. And yeah, I was going back through these paper notebooks, like cursing myself. So I do keep things on the computer now. Um, and I'm a pretty good note taker because of my background, my dissertation and my PhD and my academic background. I'm
Hmm.
pretty good at taking notes and like putting the bibliographical information at the top of the page and keeping track of page numbers, but I dump everything in one document. So I'm taking for an individual text. So I read a text on, I don't know, um, the colonization of Suriname, which was a text that I read for this book that I just finished. I didn't end up using it, I didn't, Suriname doesn't appear in the book, but I thought it would when I started. And so I read this book on the colonization of Suriname and I took all these notes. And some of those notes are still relevant to other things that are happening in the world at the time, but they're all in that one document, if
Hmm.
that makes sense. It's actually kind of hard to find stuff back sometimes because it's not organized by topic, it's organized by what book it came from or what
Yeah.
source it came from. So, thank goodness that I can, do searches on my computer. But if I don't use keywords, I'm in big trouble.
Yeah. I know people that swear by like Excel sheets and all of these
Yeah.
complicated things, and I don't know. I've tried that to organize research, and it feels like it's more work to do
Hmm.
that on the front end, but I
Yeah,
suppose
I know
it's
people who
worth it in
use
the
note
end.
cards too, right?
Hmm.
Note cards
Hmm.
for different topics or electronic note cards like in Scrivener or another program. And I'm just too old school or something, like too lazy at the front end. I'm just like, I'm putting all the notes I take on this from this source are going to be in this one document. But yeah, then you have all these sources and you have to go back through them. Yeah, every once in a while
Right.
I read through my sources again. It's sort of, what did I take notes on? Okay. Yeah.
So I think I have one more official question, and we can hit in anything that we've missed in terms of
Oh,
craft
sure.
that you'd like to share. You mentioned you have another book that is in development and on the way, so certainly want to give you the space to talk about that in any way that you would like, as well as I usually ask where people can find out more.
Oh, okay. Well, the book that's coming out next spring is a historical novel. It has no fantasy elements in it, which is a first for me. And it's set in 1941 in rural Iowa, and it's called Scattergood.
Mm,
There was an actual Quaker boarding school. There still is. But there was a Quaker boarding school in West Branch, Iowa called Scattergood during the early part of the 20th century, and it closed during the Depression. And then during World War II was reopened by the Friends as a hostel for European war refugees, mostly
oh,
Jews,
wow.
but also
Yeah.
other war refugees, and operated for a few years as a hostel. And the goal was to bring people there, get them acclimated, teach them English if they needed to learn English if they didn't already know it, help them apply for jobs, things like that, and then send them off into the world.
Mm,
Um, and then it is now again a boarding school, middle school and high school now. But anyway, so it was set during that time. It's not set at Scattergood, it's set near Scattergood,
mm,
in a on a farm. And it was really like I've gone there many times to do research. I've gone to that area. I visited Scattergood a few times, which happened back when I was drafting it and early on. I wrote a draft of this novel and then like 2003 and then set it aside. Um, and then my first book came out, so I was working on that and getting tenure and raising kids and all this stuff. And then I revised it around 2010-ish.
mm,
And in 2012, sent it out to and got an agent with that manuscript. Um, and actually sent that manuscript out to the McKnight fellowships and got a McKnight fellowship with that manuscript too. So it got great reception, and then my agent couldn't sell it.
mm,
She kept sending it out for a couple of years. She sent it out and just, we sent it everywhere we could think of. And we got really nice responses about like, oh, such a great voice. Oh, what an interesting topic, but no, right?
mm,
Um, and then we sent out Crack in the Sea. So I kept writing, right? And then 2015, we sent out Crack in the Sea and it sold right away. And it was a 2-book deal. So my agent was like, we can keep sending this out, and I said, no, you know what? We've sent it everywhere we can think of. We'll just pull it. It's fine. Like that was a manuscript that got me good things,
mhm, mhm.
but it's not going to get published. So we pulled it. And then nothing happened with it. And then summer of 2022, my agent gets a phone call or an email, I can't remember which, from one of these editors that had seen the manuscript in like 2013
Huh.
and said, I've been thinking about this manuscript. Is it still available? I just moved from one publisher to another, and now I can acquire more middle grade. And, I'd like to look at it again. So she called me, my agent called me. She was like, can we send it? And my agent was like, I don't think I still have it. You're going to have to resend it to me. I was like, I have it, but I don't know like where is it on my computer? I had to look and find the right number manuscript, like which is the one that I sent her.
Mhm, mhm.
Because there were so many revisions of it by that point. Anyway, we sent it off and I didn't think much of it because the reception had always been like nice, but no.
Uh-huh, uh,
And then I ran into the editor at NCTE in November
mhm,
and I had copies of Gossamer Summer, like I had ARCs, early copies of Gossamer Summer at NCTE. I was giving them away to people. And I ran into this editor and I had talked to her in other contexts and I really wanted to get to know her better. So I introduced myself the first time we met face to face. I said, hi. And she said, oh my gosh, we need to talk. So we walk away from the booth over to a little table and we sit down to talk. And she's like, I'm reading your book right now. And I'm like, but I didn't give you a copy. Did you get a copy from someone else? Like I didn't, I only have like 6 arcs with me. And she's like, no, 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 no. Scattergood.
mhm.
And I'm like, oh, okay. She goes, I'm up to page 200. And I think she could see on my face, I didn't know what that meant. I
Uh-huh.
hadn't read the manuscript in like 10 years. So she goes, I'm right up to the point where Sam gets his fingers chopped off. And I'm thinking to myself, who is Sam? And I chopped someone's fingers? Like what happened in this manuscript? I don't remember this at all. It was like 2 hours later, I'm walking around NCTE and I was like, oh, Sam, right. He does lose a couple fingers. I remember this now. But anyway,
How
she
funny.
said, yeah, that was so embarrassing, actually. I was like, maybe I should reread my own manuscript before I send it out. So I did read it over the holiday break. And then she got back with a contract offer in January.
Wow.
So, but yeah, it was a weird experience because I hadn't read it in so long, and I'd also constructed this narrative about it where, like, in your head where you tell yourself why something failed, and I was like,
Hmm.
well, it just wasn't well written. Like, it was just terrible writing. Like, obviously, I didn't know how to write a plot back then. I know how to write a plot now. Like, this was just bad. So I went back to read it over in December, and I'm reading it and I'm like, this isn't that bad. I read, the first 80 pages or so. I'm like, this is pretty good.
Hmm.
Like, there's
Hmm.
not that much revision to do. And after about 80 pages, I was like, oh yeah, there's revision that needs to be done. It wasn't as bad as I remembered, but there were definitely, like, I don't know, you're reading something you wrote that long ago, you've changed, right?
Right, right.
It's not only that I'm a better writer, it's that I'm a different writer than I was that long ago.
Hmm.
So there were a lot of revisions that I wanted to do. Um, and Taylor wanted revisions too. My editor wanted revisions too. So then, yeah, I worked on those, and now we're about to go into copy edits. I think I'm supposed to get the copy edit sometime today. So
Oh, cool. Very cool.
yeah, yeah, it's exciting actually. I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah. Well, I love that too, that it's never too late. There's always the possibility for a story to be resurrected in some way. So
There
looking
is, but
forward to
also,
that.
yeah, but also even if it hadn't, I still would have been okay with that. Like, I think it was good that I moved on from it too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because if I hadn't, I would still be sitting around, waiting for it to be picked up or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I would have stayed on her radar if I hadn't been publishing other stuff. So anyway, um, but yeah, I mean, there's other manuscripts that I've written that will never be dug back up. But
Unless
I'm
you're
glad.
walking around NCTE and someone comes up.
Yeah, no, 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 no. No, the other ones have not gone to my agent, so there's no way this could
Ah,
happen.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And that speaks to the process too. And looking back at what you wrote, having written other things and looking through the eyes of
Mhm.
someone who's grown as an author, I'm sure that's rewarding and also humbling in the process and all of those things
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's weird to think, I so wanted that book to be published 15 years ago,
Mm.
but it wouldn't have been very good 15 years ago. Like, I can see it so much differently now. So maybe this is an argument for me never to publish anything until like my deathbed. I don't know.
No, 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 no. Um, well, that last piece was where people can go to find out more, to follow
Oh,
along and to see Scattergood and the other
yeah.
things that you're working on.
My website is hmbouwman.com. So HMBOUWMAN. Um, and that I update infrequently, but I do update it when I have a book coming out. I'm pretty active on Facebook, but it's a private Facebook account, so you have to friend me in order to see what I'm
Hmm.
talking about for the most part.
Hmm.
And I'm not really active anywhere else. I'm on Blue Sky. I'll respond if someone says something to me, and I'm on Twitter too, but I've never used Twitter. So
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I'm not a big social media person,
It's
but
its own part-time job, I think, doing
yeah.
all of those
But I'm
things. Yeah.
sure I'm sure when I have books coming out, I'm sure I'll put something on Blue Sky too. So,
Yeah.
and that's I don't know what my address is there. It might just be Heather Bauman or HM Bauman. I think it's HM Bauman.
Yeah. I can verify. I can verify that with the Blue Sky app right away so that we have it. And I'll just trim this part so we're not sitting here waiting.
Perfect. Thank you.
Let me see.
I think
It
it's
is
safe.
indeed HM Bouwman.
Perfect.
Yep. All right. Well, anything that we've missed in the talk through that you want to make sure to share before we close out?
I don't think so. I can't think of anything. It's really fun to talk to you.
Always fun to talk with you as well, and always delighted to have you as you're working on projects. If you want to talk Scattergood or something else, glad to have you back
Thank
as
you.
projects are coming into being.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much.